Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. My name is Kevin Bille, and as always, we're very thankful for you to enjoy some time with us today. Today we have Dr. Tim Elmore, and really excited to get in with Tim. Just remember, before we start, to head on over to YouTube. You can subscribe to Good Stuff with Kevin, and then, of course, find us on all social media outlets, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Tim is the CEO and founder of Growth Leaders, best-selling author and international speaker. Dr. Tim Elmore, it's great to have you.
Thanks, Kevin. Great to be with you.
Well, hey, you're a world-renowned expert on Generation Y and Z. I told you anytime I read all your stuff, I can't keep up, and you expose my weaknesses as a parent here. But you're using all this knowledge, Tim, and what an impact you have. I mean, you're equipping educators, coaches, leaders, parents. It's just awesome what you're doing. Where, I guess, if we could start foundationally, where does this passion come from what you do?
Good question, Kevin. When I think back to how this all evolved, I think it was a couple of things. I started teaching students, high school and college students, in 1979, 1980, so many, many moons ago, about 40 years ago. I was still a student finishing up my degree, but I started teaching and so forth. That was, 79, 80. In 1983, I went on staff with Dr. John Maxwell. So a leadership guru, 21 Laws of Leadership, all the great books. He's written a gazillion books. So my love of the emerging generation got married to my love of leadership and leadership development. Mm-hmm. And I would say throughout the 80s and 90s, it just percolated as I realized the most important thing we can do is not just help kids survive childhood or, little league baseball or whatever, but to thrive as leaders. So I didn't want to just see them graduate. I wanted to see them graduate with, well, let me give you a phrase we use a lot at Growing Leaders. We want to build leaders from the inside out so they can turn their world upside down. That's kind of a little.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's what we're about.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. What would you say then are some of the main things that adults need to learn right away when it comes to this generation? What is there something that 2 or 3 things right away?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, we need to make sure we understand that Generation Z, which are the kids in K-12 education, mm-hmm. are not the millennials. They're not a continuation. I just had an NCAA Division I coach saying, I'm trying to figure out my millennial athletes. And I said, well, the millennials are your assistant coaches right now, sir. They're 27, 28, 30. So the millennials are now grown up and they're no longer the brunt of our jokes, hopefully. But Gen Z has really grown up pretty much in the 21st century. So the millennials had cell phones, Gen Z's got smartphones. It's just, this as a dad, it's just a fundamentally different world. So some of the ramifications, I would say, to answer your question, they're much more private generation than millennials were. Millennials didn't hide anything and pay the price on social media for, becoming victims of cyberbullying and everything. So they're more private, they're more anxious, mental health issues. Oh my gosh, like crazy. Dr. Robert Leahy is a cognitive behavioral therapist. He's the first person I ever heard say, the teenager of today in America has the same level of anxiety as a psychiatric patient did in the 1950s.
Wow.
So the world your kids are growing up in, when they become adolescents, you're going to have to be very intentional as a dad. And part of it's social media, part of it's just being overwhelmed with all the data they're taking in. But it's just an anxious-filled generation. Couple more words. They're more restless. ADHD is much higher. They're more tech savvy. But a couple of things that I think would be good for us to key on, because I think we often get just mad and frustrated at kids because they don't seem to get it. They're more entrepreneurial than any generation we've ever measured, way more than the millennials or Gen X. So they want to, 72% of high school students in America want to be an entrepreneur.
Really? That's high. That's high.
It is. So they won't all be, but they want to be. They don't want to go work for the man, climb the corporate ladder. They want to create an app or invent something or become YouTube famous or whatever. So entrepreneurial. And then the letter R, this is the word partner I just gave you, by the way, is redemptive. And this isn't just spiritual, they want to change the world. They want a job that they think moves the needle and matters. Where they're not just making widgets on the assembly line. So even as young athletes, student athletes, we need to remember, let's do something with our ball club where we're serving the community. Maybe that would just blow them away. It's not just pass, dribble, shoot, but treble, dribble, shoot, and serve the homeless in our city. I don't know. But that would be what I would say about Gen Z.
Yeah, that's good. And it's so funny. You brought up, just to backtrack a little bit, I think of our 5-year-old that every time the phone rings, what's he do? He thinks he doesn't have to dial anything. There's no, it's not a BlackBerry or whatever. Maybe it's the FaceTime. He's looking for the person, whereas the 13-year-old wasn't that way necessarily. It's just amazing what little difference, something like that has. And so, I mean, what are some common mistakes you see, though? I mean, what are, like, I'd be interested, like things like fear and some of these other things, to where they fit into all of this. Like, what are you seeing mistakes that leaders or parents, what are we making probably more consistently than not?
A couple of big ideas, Kevin, come to my mind. You mentioned parents. I know not everybody listening is a parent, but many of you are, I bet. I think we're a generation that feels like we're not doing good enough as a dad or a mom, so we overfunction. It's that proverbial dad in the grandstands of the Little League baseball game that's yelling and screaming like he thinks his son is going to play third base for the Boston Red Sox. And you want to go, Dad, he's going to be a software programmer. He's not going to play third base for the Boston Red Sox. So we overfunction. It's all well-intended. Right. We're well-intentioned dragons is what we are, well-intentioned dragons. But, the teachers say to me, K-12 teachers, the greatest pain in my life is not my students, it's the parents of my students, So, and they don't mean to be, but they are. So that would be one answer to your question. I think the other disconnect is parents don't like the work of connecting with this generation, because childhood looks differently now. It just, you even alluded to your 5-year-old expecting the phone to work differently. Right. So it's just too much work. And so, Kevin, maybe this metaphor will help. I often liken it to a cross-cultural experience. So if you've ever traveled overseas, you expect, okay, I gotta talk slower maybe, or understand the customs are different in France or Kenya. The language is different. The values are different. Bingo. If I'm a 45-year-old dad or whatever, I got to know my kid, it's another set of values, another set of customs, and another set of language, really. Definitely language. Wouldn't you agree? They've got.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I lived in Germany when I played that year. Now, this has been 20 years, but I think probably the biggest impact it had on me, Tim, was the selfishness that was rooted. I wanted them to speak English. I wanted to have my McDonald's. I wanted, it was easier, and I didn't have to get out of my comfort zone. And we were hey, everybody come to America. This is the best, the greatest, and you adapt to us, right? I mean, that's probably the similarities when you're saying that as a parent, because I don't know if this resonates with you at all, but I feel like when I'm a parent and I go into making a decision or have that talk or whatever it might be, I never know if it's going to be the right or wrong thing until I'm done with it. And then I know, you know what I'm saying? I mean, like that, but I feel like when I'm coaching that doesn't hit me as much, or I have a little bit more confidence in that, but I truly don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a great point you make. I bet many of your listeners are thinking, I agree with it. I don't know if I'm even connecting. And that's why I bring up the cross-cultural illustration. We, as I mentioned, we expect to work harder in Germany than so I would say dads, moms, coaches, employers expect to work harder with that 14-year-old ball player or that 21-year-old or whatever you've got, and just put the painstaking work in, because once you make a connection, you don't get control, but you get influence. So one big swap I always try to make, I did a book a few years ago called 12 Huge Mistakes Parents Can Avoid. One of them is don't think control, think connect. Have you ever noticed, Kevin, let's just take coaches for a minute. Whenever things spiral out of control, the game's not going well, we're losing, whatever, or fouling out, whatever, we want to just seize control. By God, these kids don't get it. I'm going to, Yep. So I think that's control is a myth. We do not have control over a teenager's attitude. We can connect. So an arm around the shoulder, maybe some yelling, but mostly an arm around the shoulder where we say, listen, son, would you give me permission to share some stuff? I wish I would have learned and
Okay.
when you make the connection, again, you don't get control, but you do get influence. And isn't that what we really want
Man,
in our
well,
lives?
that's really, really, really powerful, Tim, because I know where I struck out. I mean, I was 25 as a head coach, and as I've said before, I thought I knew everything and knew nothing. Still the case. Your book pointed that out. But I really think like you don't realize that sometimes it's not that my heart wasn't in the right place. I wanted what was best for that individual,
Yeah,
but I was pointing them in the direction where I wanted them to go rather than who
yes,
they were
yeah,
created to be. And that was
yeah,
hard for me because I might have seen a mistake or I might have known this, and it really changed. My arm went around that kid probably when I had kids because I now knew that
yeah,
was somebody
yeah,
else's kid I was yelling at,
yeah.
right? Whereas before I didn't know. Um, what would you say? Because it's on my mind. It really isn't transitional, I guess, per se, but I do want to talk before I forget about coronavirus and in
Yeah.
general and how is this truly impacting people? I've said from day one, I know maybe I lack empathy at some points in my life. I don't for this situation, but I'm also resilient. I want to make the most of it, but I also want to be able to empathize with people. It's not a right or wrong mentality, if you
Yeah.
understand me correctly. But like, if there's somebody like myself or others, how do I get to understand with some of the things that you've already said? And in addition, what are they really going through and why is this impacting a lot of individuals as much as it is?
Yeah. Great question. So the latest book I just put out, I try to address this issue. It's called The Pandemic Population. It's a short read, but I really try to help coaches, teachers, parents, employers, anybody that works with the emerging generation understand it is taking a toll that we adults don't quite understand. The only thing I could say to listeners maybe would say, put yourself in their shoes for a moment. You're 17, let's say you're 17, 18 years old, or you're 21, 22 years old. You're about to graduate, but
Yeah.
you're about to graduate into a world that is VUCA, V-U-C-A. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Mm,
We don't even know what the job market's going to look like. And they had these dreams, and now the dreams are getting sucked away. So I would say the first thing, and you just mentioned it, we've got to lead with empathy. We've got to lead with, I want to try to understand what they're feeling and thinking.
right.
And maybe that silly TikTok video they just posted
Yep.
is
Yep.
only a coping mechanism. They are scared to death. So I would say coaches and teachers that are listening, we got to step into their shoes and think, how would I be feeling? And then here would be maybe three to-do lists. Okay, three steps to take. One is I think we need to put personal items before workout items. If we're a coach and
Hmm.
you just jump into the drill, all right, guys, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
they start wondering, do I need to look out for number one because you're not looking out for me? But if you lean in and say, hey, before we get started, you guys okay? Is everybody all right? And I know that
Yeah.
sounds very syrupy and cheesy, maybe to some coaches who care more about X's and O's than Jimmy's and Joe's.
Right. Right. Right.
We've got to really make sure we start with, I understand you're humans and this is a hard time. At least empathize. So that personal before work. The second thing I would say is hard conversations before easy ones. I think it's a
Love it.
natural human inclination to share the good news first, or the fun news first, or the easy news first. I think when we do that to a teenager, they're going, "Are you hiding something? Are
Yeah.
you a spin doctor? What are you not telling me?" But if we jump into, "Hey, listen, I got some tough news here," bam, they go, "Well, he's real, he's honest," and
Hmm.
then you can end up with the easy stuff like, "Hey, we're doing better with our numbers now," blah blah blah. So personal before work, hard before easy. The third thing I would say is big picture before smaller details. So these kids sometimes just get overwhelmed. Their amygdala is kicking in their brain, the fight or flight thing. They're scared. Their emotions are running high. They may not show it, but they are. And I think good leaders just say, hey, let me give you the big picture. And then you could, here's a good metaphor. One of our habitudes, Kevin, is puzzle pieces and box tops. It's awfully hard to put a jigsaw puzzle together without the box top because it gives you the big picture. So we need to say, hey, let me show you the box top, guys. Now here's where your piece needs to play. So they need that kind of context. And once we give it to them, I think they're more apt to go with us on the journey. Personal before work, hard before easy, and big picture before smaller details would be what I would
Yeah, I
offer.
love it. Love it. That's truly good stuff, as I would say, Tim. I mean, I think that's That's why, you know, you hear coaches all the time, two things of your process,
Yeah.
but they don't know, you know, it is. And then the other thing, how many coaches and teachers have on their wall or on their desk, you know, a student doesn't, or a player doesn't understand how much you care until they know, you
Yeah.
know, or how much you know until how much you care, right? But they don't live that out. And
Yeah.
I think, to your point, and I would tell the audiences, listen, I know that's where I struck out early on, was that relationship piece. You know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get into being a coach and you think, well, I'm the coach and I'm going to
Yeah.
coach. Well, you do about 10% coaching.
Yeah.
Everything else that you're doing with that job, you know, you're washing the laundry, you're having those tough conversations, you're doing media, whatever. So I think that's important. One other thing before I really want to get into this scene, but you know, as I'm reading things online all the time, you know, I see some articles focus on questions and how important, you know, questions to ask, questions to answer.
Yeah.
Questions, I would think you believe, are a pretty integral part of this process, if you will. You know, what input can you give us on why those questions can be so valuable in doing those things that you're talking about right now, building that relationship with connecting and everything else that goes along
Yeah.
with it?
Wow, that's a great question. A couple of things come to my mind. One is, I think we need to ask questions about how we lead our teams first and foremost, because personality on those individual among those individual players is going to be slightly different. So we got to play chess, not checkers. You know, checkers, all your pieces move alike, they all look alike. We're playing chess now. It's a chess game, you know. So that's one. The second thing, though, I think the older your student athlete or your young person gets, the more you need to lead with questions, not
Mm.
imperatives. So you tell you tell your 5-year-old what to do. Don't touch that hot stove.
Yeah, right,
But
right.
but a 15, 16, 17-year-old, if you just are telling them what to do, they're going, I'm out of here.
Because now he's not, now he wouldn't be making the decisions, right?
That's
I'm okay. Yeah, yeah.
and God wired them to do that. They
That's
should
right.
to make their own decisions. They should be becoming men, not boys, and women, not girls. So I would say leading with questions is brilliant. And I have needed to learn the same thing because I'm such a teacher at heart. I want to just explain, and then have them go, "Ooh, you're awesome," you know. But that doesn't happen, you know. Yeah, are you the same way?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm saying like, yeah, guilty as
so
charged.
I'm just guilty. So that would be one. Here, but let me share one more thing. Something came to my mind when you
Please.
asked the question. I did a focus group with student athletes, Division I NCAA student athletes. And one of the baseball players, his name was Matt, shared with me about his virtual experience with his coach. And he was not disrespectful, but he was real. Let me tell you what he said. He said, yeah, I get the feeling like my coach doesn't know how to talk about anything except baseball.
Oh boy.
And then he went on to say, I like him and everything. There was I like him and everything,
But
but we're like fish out of water. Yeah, we don't know what to do. And I think he was trying to say, I long for my coach to establish a
mhm,
relationship with me and be able
mhm.
to talk about other things besides bunts and errors and base hits and ERA. So coaches listening, I don't know what this means. You might just be an X's and O's guy or gal, but right now, especially during this COVID-19 weird time, we have got to build relationships and earn our right to say those hard things to those young athletes. Yeah.
Well, to your point, this is, I'll throw myself under the bus here, Tim. I would remember, hey, we played the game Tuesday night, and hey, Tim, stop in the office Wednesday, and I stayed up till 3 in the morning. I put these clips together. Let's watch this 5 minutes of your offense, and here's why you played bad in here, and then they'd leave 15, 20 minutes, and I thought to myself, stayed up 3, 4 hours. I put
Yeah.
all this time into this thing, and I was able to share with him, and yet he left, and there was well, it's like he just broke up with his girlfriend. He got a D on his paper. He got in a fight with his buddy, and there was all these other things that it is important, the X's and O's, to
Yeah.
your point, and what I did, but man, I missed out on so much
Yeah.
more. And I think, you know, you stay in touch with a lot of these coaches right now as I do. And I still have coaches telling me, Tim, their girls and their guys are still upset March Madness was cut off last year. They're
Yeah.
still dealing
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. It's true.
And it's like, I want to move on, but it's hard, but you gotta confront that part. So let's go in though. I
Kevin,
love, go ahead,
I'm
please.
sorry. Do you mind if I
No,
just
no, go.
you
Yeah,
just
please.
reminded me of a great principle that might be helpful in light of what you just said.
Yeah, let's
Uh,
do it.
One of the best leadership principles that has informed me of leading young people is context explains conduct. Context explains conduct. So really, you're saying what you're thinking. You stayed up till 3 a.m. putting this film clip together, blah, blah, blah. But they bring their own experience in, which is fundamentally different. And now they're preoccupied with totally different things. That's their context. I think good leaders figure out what is the context they're coming out of so I can lead them appropriate. So I learned this actually from my adult daughter. She's 32 years old. She's a counselor. And she told me this story and I was blown away. She said, Dad, one of my colleagues, who's also a therapist, was meeting with a family whose little 5-year-old child was just doing weird things, like running around and screaming whenever they would go out, try to hide in the closet, started hiding in the bathroom. And then, Kevin, would come out of the bathroom, and this is weird and really graphic, so stay with me. This little child had rubbed poop all over their arm. And the parents finally said, this kid is weird. We got to go to the counselor. So they get into the counselor. In the very first meeting, the counselor gets alone with the mom and dad and says, do you not see what's happening? And they go, no. The counselor figured out that every time this family went out to visit aunts and uncles and other family members, there was an uncle that was sexually molesting this child.
Man.
Yeah. And so he figured, now think about this, 5 years old, if I rub poop on my arms, that's the only way I'm safe from my uncle touching me. Well, context explains conduct. He was smart, not stupid. He was brilliant, not weird.
Self-protection.
That's exactly. So mom and dad had some growth to do, maybe not the little kid. So coaches, this is just context explains conduct. We got to figure out where their lives are and lead them from there.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate you sharing that. Let's talk about seeing. I'll let you kind of dive into this, but I think this is, and we'll see if there's some questions that come out of it or continue to move along here. But I think this is going to resonate on so many levels with so many different, whatever the role might be that you have that you're listening right now. I think this is really going to resonate.
So our mutual friend Kyle Stark loves this. He tells me this is the best thing you've ever said. This is the best thing you've ever said. So I don't know if it is, but let me try to explain. Listeners, it's an acronym. So if you're making mental notes, it spells the word SCENE, SCENE. This is today's scene that our young athletes are growing up in. But by the way, it's not limited to athlete. Any student today growing up in Gen Z is growing up in today's scene. So what I'm going to do, if you can mentally picture this, is I'm going to give you 2 columns. On the left-hand column, I'm going to give you 5 words that spell the word SCENE. They describe our world today. In fact, as soon as you hear the words, you go, oh yeah, that's today for sure. That's the 21st century high-tech world. Off to the right, however, I'm going to give you a column that will explain the unintended consequences of that scenario, what we didn't see coming as a result. Okay, so let's jump in. The letter S reminds us our world today is full of speed. We want everything faster and faster. We have very little patience for anything that takes too long, right? We are a microwave generation, not a crock pot generation. I mean, it's just that muffin's taking 60 seconds to cook. What's wrong with this thing? And by the way, we call it Instagram. We want everything to be instant. Okay, it's
a click, right? I mean, it's just a click away.
It's a quick click. That's right. So think about it. We are affected by this as adults, but our kids, that's all they know. Mm-hmm. So if I'm growing up in this world today, I can easily assume that slow is bad. I don't like slow. I can't even navigate slow. But you and I both know, Kevin, there's some things don't happen fast. That process you want to see in those young, it doesn't happen fast.
No.
It happens over time, not overnight. So that's the speed. The letter C in scene, our world today is full of convenience. And we all love the modern day conveniences we enjoy, don't we? That, Uber Eats, delivering the food to our door, and oh my gosh, this is awesome, So it's not bad. I'm just saying we live in a world of convenience. If I'm a kid growing up in a world of convenience, I can easily conclude unwittingly that hard is bad. But you and I both know as coaches, the best things you're going to get in life are the hard stuff. When you do the hard stuff. Did you know, Kevin, you'll love this as a dad of 3 kids in school. The number one thing that K-12 educators say they hear from students, it's this sentence: this is too hard.
Well, I can tell you, my wife's a teacher too, 7th, 8th grade. So that is true. And that's probably why, as you're saying this, I'm all about getting out of my comfort zone. I'll even pray, give me something to, and stretch me and grow. But that's probably why, because of that convenience,
Yeah.
They don't want that part of it, because if it's that way, they just push it away because they just want to be convenient and they want to be comfortable
Yeah.
and not, yeah.
So true. Dayton Moore, the general manager of the Kansas City Royals, said something to me that I've never forgotten. He said, "We live in a world of ESPN highlights. They love the
Hmm.
highlights.
Oh my
You know,
gosh.
that's 1 minute of highlights." And we go, "Do you know what LeBron had to do to get that highlight? Do you know what, Ken
There,
Griffey
there-
Jr. had?" Yeah.
there's nothing that irks me more when people, I lived in Cleveland and went to some of these things. They have no clue. Oh, he
Yeah.
doesn't work that hard. I mean, come on. Like it is like so disrespectful to,
Yes. You know,
and to your point too, I don't want to get sidetracked here, but the basketball part of me, to the coaches right now, I think that's why more teaching has to be done on our end as a coach now, because they don't understand the game. I sat and watched the Lakers and Celtics, the Pistons and the Bulls,
yes.
the Spurs and I watched the game.
Yes.
Now, that's a challenge to my kids. If I can sit them down for a half to watch a game, I'm doing
Yeah.
pretty good,
Yeah.
whereas they can get a highlight, one half minute on House of Highlights, YouTube, wherever it's at. That satisfies them, but that doesn't translate over into understanding the game then, or understanding the coach, right?
Yeah. The attention span of a Generation Z kid is 8 seconds. Now, that does not mean they can't pay attention longer. They'll binge watch Netflix, but they'll get diverted quickly unless we're engaging them as a teacher, as a coach. So we got to be engaging. Okay,
Good,
back to
good.
scene.
Sorry to get you off track there.
That's okay. The letter E in scene is a world of entertainment. And by the way, now it's in our hands. We got a smartphone that, we're standing in line for 5 minutes. We're pulling out we don't want to be bored, and that's the point. If I grow up in a world of entertainment, I can easily assume that boring is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will admit, when I was 16 years old, I didn't like boring either. But let me tell you what we know now that we didn't know when I was 16. Neuroscientists tell us today our brains actually need boredom. They say it's in times of boredom that we develop creativity and empathy. In fact, think about the opposite, Kevin. If I'm living in a world of noise and clutter, coming at me, noise and clutter, which I do. I put my earbuds in, I want something going on. I'm not thinking for myself. I'm not reflecting and pondering the mistakes I made at the last game or whatever. So we got to figure that one out. So that's the letter E. The letter N in C.
Can I ask one question, Tim, if you don't mind me real quick? And I don't know, not if I'm right or wrong here, but when I would say, let's use my 13-year-old for example here. I mean, the process, I have a passion for it. I love it. I get all that. But honestly, the process can become boring. It's hard to work out on the days that I don't feel like it, right? So I almost, if I can convince these kids to embrace boredom, to what you're saying, there could be more there, right?
Absolutely. In fact, that's a brilliant point you make. If we're a good coach, we do embrace process. Look at John Wooden, look at Pat Summitt. So I would say yes, but what these kids need is a picture, sometimes a true picture of the outcome of that process. A great illustration, I know you've heard this before, but years ago, way back in, I think it was the 1950s, Florence Chadwick, swimmer, brilliant female swimmer, was swimming between Catalina Island and the coast of California. But this story, if you remember, was a really good story because she swam and swam. It was miles of swimming. But that day she was swimming was foggy. And 1 mile before she gets to her goal, she stops and asks to be pulled up into the boat. Her mother takes her in her arms. She's a young lady and says, "Sweetheart, we were only a mile away." But she said, "I couldn't see it."
Yeah.
So she was in the process, but couldn't see the goal. So coaches drill the process, teach them that boring is good, but show them what it could look like if they stay in this process.
Is it wrong if you're showing them what it could look like if you don't do this as well? I think what you're pointing out, right? I mean, you're saying if you put in the time, if you do that, here's the reward. But if you don't, is that just as beneficial, or is one better than the other to stay more positive with this generation?
It's a great question. I don't know if I've got the answer from science. I would think both would be helpful because I see something I don't want to be and I see something I do want to be. I tend to think the positive might be more for a kid, more helpful because they may not be able to imagine either. But I do think both. We are very visual people. That's why we teach with images. we're visual people. We think in pictures. So I think any picture is good, but I
Yeah,
tend to lean toward in my gut, the positive picture is better.
yeah, and it makes sense. And I guess I go back to what you said a little bit earlier about that real conversation. That's kind of got to be part of it, because if I'm not letting him know that that's not an option, maybe I'm leaving something out. But yeah, I totally
Yeah.
get it. Yeah, please continue. This is great. This
Okay.
is really, really good.
2 more letters. The letter N reminds us our world today is full of nurture. So the world of adults, coaches, parents, teachers, etc., is very, very safety conscious. We have to be. In fact, think about today. I mean, 6 feet apart, wash your hands 20 times a day, blah, 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 blah. So and we should be safety conscious. But what's bad about our nurture is it's unwittingly sent the message, risk is bad. So they might draw the conclusion, well, don't take any risk. Well, Kevin, you're never going to win a championship unless you take a risk. You're never going to accomplish anything great unless you take a risk. Our nation was built on risk. We started America saying, I don't know what's going to work, but we don't want what we had in the UK. So I would say, just know you may see a risk-averse set of kids on that field or that court. And it's probably because we have been a safety first, nurturing,
Yeah.
knee pads, elbow pads, helmets on them at dinner time. I'm kidding. But you know what I mean. Do you not see this in kids today?
Oh, yeah. And I think sometimes if I'm being completely transparent as a parent, I want discomfort, but it's hard for me to go through that. It's hard for me to
Yes.
watch it, even knowing. So maybe I'll step in where I shouldn't step in. And then afterwards, like I said earlier, it's like, why did I do that? It's because it's just instinctively, I love them. I care about them.
Yes.
I want what's best for them. But
Yeah.
them being uncomfortable, them taking a risk and falling, them getting on that bike and scraping their knee, it's all good for them at the end of the day.
Well, you bring up a great point. It is human nature for dads, moms, even loving coaches to say, I want the best, and then I sabotage my own development, of them. Here's a statement that I have learned and I've tried to practice from the time I heard it. The further out I can see into the future, the better decision I make as a leader today for kids. If I see that I'm helping them today, but not tomorrow because I took away the pain or the, whatever, I'm not a good leader. Yeah, and I don't want my kids to see a therapist at 30 years old because I was such a horrible.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. The last letter in scene. So it's speed, convenience, entertainment, nurture. The last letter E. My gosh, I'm probably going to sound like an old grandpa right now, but the world we live in today is a world of entitlement. We feel more entitled today. All of us do, even kids and adults. In fact, let me illustrate just in case you think I'm an old grandpa. 100 years ago, no one felt entitled to air-conditioned homes. There was no such thing as air. So we naturally feel more entitled as technology's better, et cetera. But you and I both know where I'm going with this. If I'm growing up as a kid today in a world of entitlement, I can draw the conclusion, labor is bad. I shouldn't have to work for this. I should get the trophy just for participating or whatever, that sort of thing. And you and I both know this does not turn out well in the long run for that young man or that young woman. So we've got to combat speed, convenience, entertainment, nurture, entitlement. Real quick, one of the universities we work with their athletic department is University of Alabama. Nick Saban and others. Nick Saban has taught his players, hard is good, slow is good. He's the process man. So all I'm saying to listeners right now is we've got to be countercultural. In fact, stick that in the brains of your athletes. What if we were so different from everybody else? You're going to get a faster job when you graduate. You're going to be a better husband. You're going to be a better human being. If we do the opposite of what these lame brain people are doing out there, I don't know,
Yeah.
So
one follow-up I would have to that, Tim, is, with the speed thing, if I'm not getting results as a coach, which in this day and age is left and right hand column, wins and losses, the lack of buy-in, believe in, however you want to say that, doesn't come. How can I, if I am a leader, if I'm a coach, if it's taken me time to grow that program, I see it clearly. I look at, so I took over this program 0-30 in the league, 9-49 overall my first year. Now it took 4 or 5 years to get there. Now I was fine with where it was going. It was tough, but the vision, the North Star, it was there. Yeah. But it's hard to get kids to believe in you when they don't see that immediately. What advice would you give them when it comes to that?
That's a great question. I wish I had a great answer for a great question. I remember going on staff with John Maxwell, this leadership guru who's written best-selling books. He put me in charge of a department. And one of the earliest meetings I had with him was to say, I agree with you. This goal you've given me to grow this department is spot on. You need to give me some time. And I began to lay out my game plan. And then together we said,
That's good.
This might be a coach to an athletic director.
Yeah, right.
How much time are you willing to, wouldn't you agree, Kevin? Division I coaches, it's win or go.
It's quick.
Win or go. And so I don't blame them for going, man, I'm going to cut corners. I got to put some W's in there. So I think we need to talk about realistically, what is the time, what's it going to take? And then we do need to see progress for sure each year, not a championship on year one, but progress. But I think too, I keep dropping names, and I don't mean to be a name dropper. It's learning these things from great people. Gene Smith, as you probably well know, is the athletic director and the vice president at Ohio State University. Mm-hmm. He's got a sign up in his office that we talked about not long ago. You got to go slow to go fast. Yep. We all want to go fast. So he explained, he said, I'll tell you what this meant to me. To do it right, I may not get all the results I want in year one. I'm going to plod along, fix things. And if I'll be willing to put in the time to do it slowly right, boy, fourth gear comes and boy, it's awesome. Yeah. So I think we
awesome.
Just got to.
Well, yeah. I mean, you think of like John Wooden, 16 years till he wins his first title. Then Coach K, we might have never known Coach K the way that we know him now, and so a lot of people, they lose patience throughout that process. What would you say as we wrap up here, and I'll get into 3-pointers with you? What are some of the biggest lessons or takeaways that you've learned through this leadership development, Tim?
Wow. I would say building soft skills is every bit as important as building hard skills. So I realize for teachers, hard skills are maybe technology, math, science, reading, writing, arithmetic. For a coach, it's, the hard skills are, passing, dribbling, shooting, whatever. But soft skills are what makes a good teammate. It's what makes a good spouse. It's what makes a good, teammate later when they're, basketball's done and now I'm in a workspace. So I want to just encourage you, build people skills in your players and know that the way they treat each other and the way they treat a girl, if they're a boy, is so important because they're training for the future. So that would be one thing. And that's social emotional learning. Many schools are caught up now in social emotional learning. I think it's every bit as important as reading, writing, arithmetic. Yeah. Because kids are anxious and they're not, that whole drill. So I would say that would be one of my big answers to that question.
Well, I would piggyback off that because I think the one thing I'll tell my boys when my phone rings, we're in the car and it's a college teammate. They know maybe that I was a good player, but they don't care about how many points I scored. Yeah. It's about what type of person I am, and that's why we have that relationship still ongoing today. Awesome. I definitely at the end here want to talk about some books and some more in terms of what Growing Leaders offers. But I'm going to go through somewhat of a rapid fire, test your jumper out here, 3-pointers. So number one, if people could learn, one thing, and I guess because there's so much in here, but like if they could take one thing away from this, what would you want that one thing to be?
Well, when I think about something perhaps I haven't said, Kevin, it might be that the leadership journey really begins with self-leadership. Mm-hmm. It's not glitzy. It's not glamorous. It's like the foundation of a house. You don't drive by a new neighborhood to look at the concrete foundations. It's boring. But that concrete foundation is that's the biggest reason that house is going to last.
That's right.
So coaches listening, don't just pass this on to your student athletes unless you're practicing it first. Look in the mirror and say, do I respect the person staring back at me? So self-leadership is self-regulation. It's discipline. It's ethics. It's, it's having a set of values. If I can get that down, I don't need to worry about the badge I wear. They're going to follow me. Yeah, so I would say that would be my answer to that.
That's great. Number two, if Tim could have stepped over here in Kevin's shoes today and asked him a question that I did not ask, what should have I asked?
You were the master interviewer, Kevin. Oh my gosh.
Got to hold me accountable here.
Okay, I do. Yeah. Let me just think. Okay, here's one. It's in light of the pandemic we're in right now. You and I referenced earlier that so many kids are just struggling. Mm-hmm. I believe that we automatically assume that anybody going through trauma, and this is a little bit traumatic for kids today, this pandemic and the economic depression and, protests and everything else going on. I would say we need to know that PTSD does not have to happen after trauma. We think it does, because we all know that term, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I recently found out, as I dug through some research, PTG is actually much more popular than PTSD. Only 1 out of 5 trauma victims goes through PTSD. 4 out of 5 go through PTG. Now, PTG is post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth. Isn't this what we want as coaches?
Well, 4 or 5.
So instead of saying, gee, I hope we make it through this year and survive, instead of saying, as a coach, it's saying, hey guys on the team, what if we didn't just survive this thing? We came out stronger than that.
Yes.
We made it. We're a brush fire, not a candle. A candle goes out with the smallest of breath. A wildfire gets stronger in the winds. So I think PTG means we need to talk about what they're feeling and going through. We need to empathize with them, let them talk about the crap they feel like they're going through, but then guide them into a positive narrative. That's PTG. So I would say that would be the question.
I love it. Thank you for adding that. I got off the phone the other day with a best friend who's a coach. I think they had an hour shoot around. He said they were on the floor 3-4 hours just talking about, Black and white lives and how powerful that conversation was and how that's, 3 hours on that over the 1 hours of the X's and O's. So finally, third question, good stuff. Just the name of this, something I always say, you've given us plenty, but before we get into, once again, what you're doing and some of the ways to connect, what's some further good stuff that you can give us in closing?
My favorite book I read 2 years ago, and my favorite book of the year, I want to just recommend. I'm not getting paid to.
Yeah, let's do it.
I loved the book, The Coddling of the American Mind. It's written by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. But if you just went to Amazon, put in The Coddling, CODDLING, Coddling of the American Mind, they go through the research on how, if we really care about these kids today, we have got to make sure they're mentally tough. And they're not just screaming, yelling, old fogies. They are people that share research and say, here's how we do this. So that would be a great book. The book I'm reading right now, Kevin, I'm loving. It's called, you're going to laugh, Think Like a Monk. Think Like a Monk.
Is this Jay?
Isn't that great?
Is this?
Yeah, Jay Shetty.
Yeah.
So Jay, for listeners that don't know, he became a monk. Right out of college. His parents were not happy about it because he was going to be this brilliant business person, but he became a monk, went down to India, and he said, man, I trained my mind. And I'm loving the book. I'm learning, because I live in a noisy world too, how to be quiet, how to think. So I'm just having fun with that book right now.
That's good. Well, hey, 3 for 3. And I've mentioned it on here a couple of times before, and I know one of our guest before mentioned The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. That's a great book. To quiet as well. So, well, hey, tell us a little bit here, just in general, the books, maybe even the recent one, where people can, connect to you guys. I mean, there's so much that you guys are offering, Tim. I mean, it's we could probably do a whole podcast and everything you're doing, but just some things to give our listeners an idea of that and then where they can go to get all these resources.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kevin, for asking. We really do try to serve coaches and teachers, especially. So our website is the place really to find most everything. It's growingleaders.com, growingleaders.com. And they're free stuff. I do a blog every week. You can subscribe to the articles, and we talk about these Kevin, what we're talking about today, this is the kind of stuff that I write about. So that would be helpful. I did mention the book, The Pandemic Population. This came out just a few months ago. It's how to coach kids through this weird time. It's a short read. It's inexpensive. I think it's $10, but that book might be helpful. And then the thing we do with lots and lots of teams, Division I teams, even pro teams, Kyle Stark and I met through these Habitudes. We have a curriculum that starts discussions called Habitudes. It's habits and attitudes. Habitudes are images that form leadership habits and attitudes. It's a way of teaching a timeless principle through the power of a picture. And because pictures are worth 1,000 words, it starts good conversation. So maybe right before practice, you look at one of these images and you have a discussion on focus or whatever. So anyway, that's all on growingleaders.com. If that
Awesome.
sounds intriguing, they can sure go and check it out and see if they like it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course I know social media they can find you. I'm on there following you and getting good nuggets. But man, Tim, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. Number one, but just everything that you're offering and what you do. I know that I've personally benefited from this. And I know others have, but there's just so many people maybe that are out there that have not or haven't maybe taken the time to confront these topics, self-reflect, look in the mirror. What can I do to grow? And you offer so much out there, Tim. So God bless you in this journey. Thanks for doing what you're doing. And once again, just being with us here today.
My pleasure. Kevin, it was an honor to be with you. Thanks for having me on. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Once again, the application of this message, there is so much good stuff in here. Please, as always, reach out. Tell us how this has affected you in a positive way and what you've learned from today's episode. We'll be getting more out to you here, taking a break a little bit after Tim and releasing everything eventually here on podcast as well. But jump onto YouTube, find out all these other videos. And until next time, good stuff.